11:47 p.m., February 14, 1945. Carpathian Mountains, Eastern Front. Soviet Major Dmitry Volkow stared out through the frozen window of his command post. The full moon night was clear, almost eerily peaceful. Little did he know, he had exactly 13 minutes left to live. Outside, 187 yards away, Lance Corporal Matthias Hetzenauer lay motionless in the snow. His breath crystallized in the -2 Fahrenheit cold. Through the 6x scope of his Kar 98K rifle, he watched the illuminated window. 15 Soviet officers had gathered for a late-night strategy meeting. Hetzenauer knew this one night would forever change the history of sniping. On this frigid February night in 1945, the 20-year-old Austrian from Tyrol accomplished something that even seasoned military historians would scarcely believe decades later. What transpired over the next 7 hours became known in Soviet war diaries as the Nightmare of Lupkov Pass. The enemy troops would later call him the Ghost of the Carpathians. But on this particular evening, Matthias Hetzenauer was simply a young soldier, fulfilling his duty with a precision that struck fear into the hearts of even his own comrades. The 3rd Mountain Division had been in retreat for weeks. This elite unit, specifically trained for mountain warfare, had fought on the hardest fronts of the Eastern conflict since 1941. From an original strength of 15,000 men, barely 4,000 remained in February 1945. The others had fallen, been wounded, gone missing, or been captured. Yet these 4,000 were the hardest of the hard mountain warriors who fought in the Alps and Carpathians, where ordinary infantry failed. The Soviet offensive rolled relentlessly westward. 3 Soviet armies against a decimated German division. The mathematics of war were unforgiving, but in the Carpathian Mountains, different rules applied. Here, it wasn't just about numbers, but skill, knowledge of the terrain, and the individual soldier. And Hetzenauer was the secret weapon that the Red Army knew nothing about. Since August 1944, when he was deployed in the Carpathians, he had already recorded over 170 confirmed kills. 170 Soviet soldiers who had looked through his scope before they died. But confirmed kills were just the tip of the iceberg. In the German army, a kill only counted if an officer witnessed it. Hetzenauer often operated alone, far behind enemy lines, on multi-day patrols where no officer was around. How many soldiers Hetzenauer actually eliminated while on solo patrol would never be known. His comrades estimated the true number to be 3 times that. Colonel Friedrich Weber, his divisional commander, wrote in a report, "Hetzenauer is not normal infantry. He is a strategic weapon, a single man who is worth an entire company. I would trade 10 tanks for 10 men like him." Hetzenauer wasn't your typical soldier. As the son of a Tyrolean hunter, he had learned to shoot before he could read. In the mountains of his homeland, he had taken down chamois at ranges exceeding 800 yards. The patience of a hunter, the eye of an eagle. The nerves of steel, this combination made him the German army's deadliest weapon on the Eastern Front. Born on December 23, 1924, in Brixen im Theiler, Hetzenauer grew up in a world where precision meant the difference between life and death. Not in war, but hunting in the Tyrolean Alps. His father took him stalking game as early as 6 years old. There, he learned to read the wind, control his breathing, remain motionless for hours. These skills, learned in peaceful mountains, would become the deadliest weapons on the Eastern Front. In March 1944, at just 19 years old, he was sent for sniper training at the Seetaler Alps training ground in Styria. The instructors immediately recognized his exceptional talent. While other recruits practiced at 300 yards, Hetzenauer was already hitting targets at 800 yards. His hit rate was 98%, unheard of for a trainee. An instructor noted in his evaluation report, "This soldier will either become a legend or die young. There is no middle ground for someone with these abilities. But what really set him apart was his ice-cold methodology. Hetzenauer never targeted ordinary soldiers. His targets were surgically selected commanders, machine gunners, artillery observers. Each of his shots was intended to destroy the enemy's structure, not just take lives. He hadn't learned this philosophy from manuals. He had developed it himself. "If you want to kill a wolf, aim for the alpha," his father once said. "The whole pack will panic." Hetzenauer transferred this hunter's wisdom to the war with devastating efficiency. The Soviets had heard whispers of a German ghost sniper. Officers were vanishing. One moment they were standing commanding their troops. The next moment they were dead, struck by a bullet from an impossible distance. The psychological effect was devastating. Soviet soldiers refused to wear officer rank insignia. Commanders only led their units in the darkness. But even the night offered no protection, not against Matthias Hetzenauer. On this February 14th, Soviet intelligence had identified a major weakness in the German defense. A breakthrough here would encircle the entire 3rd Mountain Division. Major Volkov had ordered all battalion commanders to a night meeting. The operation was scheduled to begin at dawn. 15 officers, including 3 majors, 7 captains, and 5 lieutenants, gathered in the former school building of the village of Lubkov. The building lay deep within Soviet-controlled territory, almost 1.25 miles behind the front lines. They felt safe. That was their first mistake. Hetzenauer had been observing the movements for 3 days. Hidden in a ruined farmhouse, he had registered the increasing activity. Vehicles came and went. Radio traffic increased. Something big was brewing. On the evening of February 14th, he saw a convoy of staff cars stop at the school building. Officers got out. 1, 2, 5, 10. He counted them all. Through his scope, he recognized the rank insignia. His heart did not race. His hands did not tremble. Matthias Hetzenauer was 20 years old, but in that moment, he was the incarnation of death itself. The distance was 1,187 yards. For most snipers in the world, an impossible range. Even the best Soviet marksmen rarely operated beyond 400 yards. But Hetzenauer already had kills at over 1,200 yards, 100 meters, documented. His weapon of choice was the Kar 98K rifle, modified for sniping with a 6x Zeiss scope. While most German snipers preferred the 4x scope, Hetzenauer had opted for the 6x variant. The higher magnification made aiming more difficult. Every hand movement was amplified, every heartbeat visible. But in Hetzenauer's hands, this difficulty became an advantage. He could discern details at distances impossible for others. The rifle itself weighed 4.1 kilograms, crafted from steel and walnut wood with German precision. The 7.92 millimeter cartridge, the standard infantry ammunition of the German army, was specially selected for snipers. Not the newest ammunition, but batches that had proven particularly consistent in ballistic tests. Hetzenauer carried only 40 rounds with him. Each one inspected before use, weighed, checked for microscopic defects. Of those 40, he would use only 15 this night. Each one, a death sentence. He knew his rifle, the way a pianist knows their instrument. Every quirk, every imperfection, how the wind affected the bullet at different temperatures. He had spent hundreds of hours perfecting ballistic calculations. At -18 degrees Celsius, the bullet flew differently than at +20. The cold air was denser, slowing the projectile more. He had to aim higher, compensate for the drop. At 1,087 meters, a 7.92 millimeter cartridge would drop about 7.3 meters. That meant he had to aim at a point over 2 stories above his actual target. Then there was the wind in the Carpathian Mountains. The winds were unpredictable, changing with altitude. Ground wind, maybe 5 kilometers per hour from the northeast, but halfway to the target, at 30 meters altitude, the wind might be 15 kilometers per hour from the east. The bullet would take 2.4 seconds to reach the target. In that time, the wind could shift it by over half a meter. Life or death, decided by calculations. Most people considered impossible. Temperature, humidity, altitude, Earth's rotation, air pressure, everything factored into his calculations. He kept no notebook, no manual. Everything was stored in his head, perfected through hundreds of shots, thousands of hours of training. His brain was a biological ballistic computer, more precise than any machine of the time. At 11:47 p.m., the first bullet struck. Major Volkov was standing at the window, explaining the attack positions on a map. The 7.92mm cartridge pierced the glass and hit him in the upper chest. He was dead before he hit the floor. The other officers froze. A window? Who would shoot through a window from that distance? Impossible. It must have been a ricochet, a stray bullet. They had no time to grasp the truth. Captain Sokolov ran to the window to see where the shot came from. Hetzenauer's second bullet struck him 1.7 seconds later. The Austrian sniper had already reloaded, his movements as fluid as water. In the German army sniper school, they had taught him, the first shot kills the enemy, the second shot kills the rescuer, the third shot kills hope. Hetzenauer lived by this principle. Panic erupted in the command post. The officers threw themselves to the ground. Someone screamed to turn off the lights, but the school building had 6 windows, and the moon was bright enough. Lieutenant Karpov crawled towards the door. Hetzenauer's third bullet pierced the wooden door and found its target. The young Soviet officer, only 23 years old, had written a letter to his mother 2 days ago. It would never arrive. What the Soviets didn't understand. Hetzenauer could see them, but they couldn't even dream of seeing him. Over a kilometer away, blended into the shadows of a destroyed building, he was invisible. His white winter camouflage, self-sewn with techniques he had learned from Tyrolean poachers, made him one with the snow. Only the scope moved, minimal, precise, deadly. The Soviet officers desperately tried to organize a defense. Major Petrov, now the highest-ranking survivor, bellowed orders. All lights out, everyone away from the windows. Medics for the wounded, but there were no wounded. Hetzenauer's shots were surgical. Every hit was fatal. German army snipers were trained to aim for the upper chest, heart, lungs, major arteries, instant death, no second chances. By 12:23 a.m., 36 minutes after the first shot, Hetzenauer had eliminated 7 Soviet officers, but he wasn't finished yet. Through his scope, he saw the survivors trying to escape through a back door. He had anticipated this reaction. The back door opened onto a small courtyard, surrounded by a low stone wall. Perfect cover. The Soviets thought, perfect trap. Hetzenauer knew. Captain Ivanov was the first to dare to run out. Hetzenauer's 8th bullet struck him. The moment he thought he was safe, the others froze. They were trapped. Staying in the building meant being a sitting duck. Fleeing meant running into Hetzenauer's line of fire. The psychological warfare had begun, and Hetzenauer was a master of this cruel game. But then something happened that even Hetzenauer hadn't expected. The Soviets sent out an infantry squad to find and eliminate the sniper. Over 50 soldiers swarmed out, searching the surrounding ruins. They came dangerously close to Hetzenauer's position, 400 meters, 300 meters, 200 meters. A normal sniper would have abandoned his position and retreated, but Matthias Hetzenauer was not normal. He remained absolutely still. The Tyrolean hunting techniques his father had taught him now came into play. He could remain motionless for hours, not even his breathing betrayed him. The Soviet soldiers came within 80 meters. One looked directly in his direction. Hetzenauer saw the man through his scope, saw the fear in his eyes, but the Soviets saw only snow and ruins. After 40 agonizing minutes, the search parties withdrew. They had found nothing. How could they? They were looking for a man. Hetzenauer had become a ghost. At 2:15 a.m., he returned to his deadly work. The remaining officers in the school building believed the nightmare was over. Maybe the sniper had fled. Maybe it was safe to move. Major Petrov dared to stand up. Hetzenauer's 9th bullet taught him otherwise. Desperation inside the building morphed into sheer panic. Some officers were praying, others weeping. They were seasoned soldiers, survivors of Stalingrad, veterans of Kursk. But this was different. This wasn't a fight, it was an execution. News of the disaster spread through the Soviet lines like wildfire. A single German sniper had 15 officers pinned down. The Soviet High Command ordered everything be done to rescue the officers and to kill the sniper. Artillery was brought in. Mortars were positioned. If they couldn't find him, they would destroy every possible hiding place. At 03:30 hours, the bombardment began. Hetzenauer had anticipated this too. As the first shells impacted, he was already 200 meters from his original position. He moved through the ruins like a shadow, exploiting every crater, every scrap of cover. But he wasn't retreating. He was simply relocating. The game wasn't over. Not yet. Soviet artillery rained down blindly onto the ruins. Hundreds of shells pulverized what remained of the village. The noise was deafening. But after 20 minutes, the firing ceased. Ammunition was too precious to waste endlessly in the sudden silence. Hetzenauer repositioned himself. New location, same vantage point on the schoolhouse. Distance now, 134 meters. He adjusted his scope. Calculated the new ballistic variables. The Soviets believed their artillery barrage had solved the problem. They began to move again. That was their last mistake. Between 04 and 06:30 hours, Hetzenauer eliminated the remaining officers, one by one. Each shot a masterpiece of ballistic precision. Lieutenant Orlov, attempting to drink water. Captain Mikhailov, trying to call for help on the radio. Major Antonov, believing the dawn would offer him cover. The dawn only brought better visibility for Hetzenauer. By 06:47 hours, as the sun crested over the Carpathian Mountains, it was over. 15 Soviet officers were dead. The planned offensive decapitated before it even began. Matthias Hetzenauer methodically packed up his Kar 98K rifle, took a swig of frozen water from his canteen, and began the long march back to the German lines. 7 hours, 15 shots, 15 hits, no wasted ammunition. Perfection in its deadliest form. Soviet troops found the schoolhouse at dawn. The scene that greeted them would go down in the Red Army war diaries as one of the most shocking examples of German sniper precision. 15 officers, all killed with a single shot, most from over a kilometer away. Lieutenant Grigory Sokolov, the first officer to enter the scene, would later say in a 1989 interview, "I had seen Stalingrad. I had survived Kursk. I thought I'd seen everything war had to offer. But what I found in that schoolhouse was different. It wasn't the brutality of battle. It was the surgical precision. Each officer with a single shot, most dead before they even knew what was happening. It was as if death itself had taken its deadliest form that night." Red Army ballistic experts were flown in from Moscow to analyze the scene. Colonel Anatoly Petrov, head of Soviet sniper training, examined every impact, every trajectory, every angle. His report, declassified only in 2002, is a chilling document. He wrote, Based on the analysis of the bullet wounds and the reconstructed trajectories, the sniper operated from distances between 980 and 1,147 meters. Hit accuracy was 100%. 15 shots, 15 hits, all fatal. Time elapsed between first and last shot, approximately 7 hours. This suggests a patience and self-discipline that we do not achieve in our own training. But the most shocking part of Petrov's report came in his conclusions. Their calculations showed a precision they had deemed impossible. Under the prevailing weather conditions, -18 degrees, shifting winds, limited moonlight, Soviet snipers would not have even attempted to shoot from such distances. Yet this German sniper, presumably Lance Corporal Matthias Hetzenauer, based on subsequent intelligence reports, had not only shot, but placed every shot with an accuracy bordering on the supernatural. An intelligence officer noted in his report, "We are not fighting a soldier. We are fighting a force of nature." Recommendation: all planned operations in the Carpathian region are to be suspended until this sniper is neutralized or the region is abandoned. The morale of our troops is critically compromised. Officers are refusing to occupy command posts in the region. Some have requested transfers. This is no longer a tactical problem, but a psychological disaster. But what terrified the Soviets even more than the tactical brilliance was the psychological message. A single man had single-handedly nullified an entire operation. A 20-year-old Austrian had eliminated 15 experienced officers, while hundreds of Soviet soldiers watched helplessly. The impact on morale was devastating. Soviet officers refused to hold meetings at night. Command posts were moved deep into bunkers. No one wanted to be the next victim of the ghost of the Carpathians. The German army only learned the full extent of Hetzenauer's feat days later. He himself had submitted only a terse report. 15 enemy officers eliminated, operation successful, no friendly casualties. For Hetzenauer, it was just another night on the Eastern Front. But for the Soviet army, it was a turning point. They had learned that even behind their own lines, even in the dead of night, no one was safe from the deadly precision of German snipers. Historical records from the 3rd Mountain Division document this operation as one of the most successful single-handed sniper engagements of the entire World War II. The Soviet offensive, scheduled for February 15th, was delayed by 3 weeks. The psychological effect lingered even longer. Even after the war's end, in interviews with Soviet veterans, the stories persisted. Of the ghost sniper who wiped out an entire officer corps, Matthias Hetzenauer continued his service with the same deadly efficiency. By the war's end in May 1945, he had achieved 345 confirmed kills. The true number will never be known. On April 17, 1945, just weeks before the war ended, he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. The justification, delivered by Lieutenant General Paul Klatt, was unequivocal. For extraordinary bravery and precision. His kills were equivalent to 2 enemy companies, with no regard for his own safety. In May 1945, Hetzenauer was captured by Soviet troops. The Soviets knew exactly who he was. They had searched for him, hunted him, desperately tried to stop him. Now, they finally had him. He spent 5 years in Soviet prisoner of war camps. The conditions were brutal. Many did not survive. But Matthias Hetzenauer, the man who had lain motionless for 7 hours in the Carpathian winter, survived. The same tenacity that had made him the deadliest German sniper also kept him alive in captivity. In 1950, he returned to Austria. He never spoke about his war experiences. The weight of 345 confirmed kills, perhaps over 1,000 actual killings, he carried in silence. To the outside world, He was a simple man who lived in the Tyrolean mountains. But those who knew his story saw something in his eyes that no one could put into words. The burden of perfection, the price of deadly precision. Military historians around the world still study Hetzenauer's tactics today. His ability to hit targets from extreme distances, his patience to remain motionless for hours, his psychological warfare that paralyzed entire units. Modern snipers learn from his documented engagements. The operation of February 14th, 1945, is taught as a case study at military academies, not because of the kills, but because of the tactical genius. What makes a man like that? Both German and Soviet officers asked themselves this question. Hetzenauer was no monster. He was a farmer's son from Tyrol. He loved the mountains, the hunt, the silence. But the war had transformed these skills into something deadly. His comrades described him as quiet, modest, almost shy. But with a rifle in his hand, he became a force of nature. The Soviet intelligence reports about Hetzenauer make fascinating reading. They desperately tried to understand him, to analyze his methods, to develop countermeasures. A report from March 1945 describes him as the most dangerous individual soldier on the Eastern Front. Recommendation: alert all units. Avoid predictable patterns. No nightly gatherings of officers. Extreme caution in the Carpathian region. But all the warnings could not prevent Hetzenauer from continuing his deadly work. His longest confirmed kill was at 100 meters, a distance at which most snipers would not even aim. At such distances, hundreds of variables come into play: wind speed at different altitudes, air pressure, temperature, humidity. The Earth's rotation even affects the trajectory. Hetzenauer calculated all of this instinctively, his brain a biological computer for ballistic physics. His preferred tactic was the elimination of commanders and machine gunners. Every one of his shots should have the maximum tactical effect. He never shot out of anger or revenge. It was pure mathematics. Which target would have the greatest impact on the enemy's fighting strength? This cold, calculating logic made him more effective than 100 normal soldiers. The night of February 14th, 1945, represented the peak of this philosophy. 15 officers eliminated meant not just 15 dead. It meant 15 destroyed command chains, hundreds of soldiers without leadership, a complete operation cancelled. Thousands of lives on both sides affected by the actions of a single man on an ice-cold night. This is the true power of a master sniper. Not the number of kills, but their tactical impact. Hetzenauer understood this on a level that few ever reached. Every shot was an investment. Every target carefully selected for maximum effect. This mindset, combined with superhuman precision, made him a legend. History often forgets the individual soldiers. Battles become statistics. Wars become numbers in history books. But some stories endure because they reveal something fundamental about human nature. Matthias Hetzenauer's story shows us the limits of human ability, what a single person can achieve when talent, training, and necessity come together. If this historical truth is important to you, then support me with YouTube's super thanks, the golden heart below. Every super thanks allows me to spend weeks in archives, digitizing Soviet war diaries, interviewing the last eyewitnesses. These stories disappear with every generation. Help me preserve them for the future. These men, their actions, their sacrifices, deserve to be remembered, not as a glorification of war, but as a testament to what humans are capable of. For better or for worse, the Carpathian Mountains are peaceful today. Tourists hike through the same mountains where Hetzenauer once performed his deadly duty. The village of Lubkov has been rebuilt. The old school building is no longer there, but the story remains, in the archives, in the memories, in the lessons we can learn from it. Matthias Hetzenauer died in 2004, at the age of 79. He had survived the war, survived captivity, and lived a long life in peace. Until the end, he barely spoke about his war experiences. The burden of 345 confirmed lives was too heavy for words. But his story lives on, studied by military personnel, analyzed by historians, told by people like us, who believe that these truths must be preserved. The night of February 14, 1945, remains a testament to human capabilities under the most extreme conditions. A 20-year-old man, alone in enemy territory, who brought a complete Soviet operation to a standstill, not through technology, not through overwhelming force, but through pure skill, ice-cold nerves, and a precision that bordered on the supernatural. This is the reality of war. Not the big battles in history books, but the individual moments where a human being makes history. Hetzenauer's legacy is complex. He was a deadly soldier, responsible for hundreds of deaths, but he was also a master of his craft, whose abilities redefined the limits of what was possible. History is never black and white. It's written in shades of grey, in blood, and courage, and human suffering. The Soviet soldiers who perished that night also had families. They too were human beings, with dreams and hopes. Their deaths were a tragedy, as every death in war is a tragedy. But their story is part of Hetzenauer's story. You can't tell one without the other. That's the grim reality of military history. For every hero, there are sacrifices. For every triumph, there is tragedy. Modern sniper training is partially based on lessons learned from Hetzenauer, his techniques of camouflage, his ballistic calculations, his understanding of psychological warfare. All of this is studied and taught. But one thing cannot be taught, that which Hetzenauer possessed deep within, the ability to remain absolutely still for hours. To choose the precise moment, to feel the pressure and transform it into focus rather than fear. German sniper training during World War II was among the most advanced in the world. But even within that system, Hetzenauer stood apart. His instructors quickly realized they were dealing with a natural talent. His shooting scores in training shattered all records. But records on the practice range are one thing. Perfection in combat, when life is on the line, is something entirely different. On February 14, 1945, in the bitter cold of the Carpathian Mountains, Matthias Hetzenauer proved that training and talent are a lethal combination. He demonstrated what a single, highly skilled soldier can achieve. He showed that in modern warfare, despite all the technology and massive armies, the individual warrior can still be decisive. The militaries of the world never forgot that lesson. It's the reason why elite snipers continue to play a central role in all modern armies today. What impressed you the most about this story? Many viewers have shared incredible family histories. Grandfathers who fought on the Eastern Front, letters discovered in attics, war diaries that have survived generations. Please share your family stories from this era below. Every comment is a piece of history that we preserve together, because these men, these moments, these truths must never be forgotten.